Hi, everybody. We're getting ready to start boot camp. We're going to let everybody gather, but this week, have your CMA ready because we're going to start on that. Now that I know how to get in there. Okay. Did everybody do a CMA? Yes. Excellent. I can't wait to hear your numbers, what your thoughts are. So does everybody have a packet?
Nope. Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you? And then I'm going to be going over the purchase and sell again today. We're going to do it within the time frame of the class. Last time we went over and didn't get to that. Not everybody saw it, so I want to make sure that everyone can see that today because I think it's very, very important. Put a couple more out just in case people come late. And then I'll hand the purchase and sell out at the last, and that way, if what I would suggest is as I'm going over the purchase and sell with you, that if you certain things that maybe I explained, you want to make notes on it to say, oh, don't forget this, or this is what this means. It'll help you later on because believe me, the problem is when you get ready to do this in front of a client, you're going to be nervous. And so when you're nervous, it's hard to remember everything. So the more you practice this with a colleague, a significant other, anybody that'll let you sit in front of them and do this, the easier and the better it's going to be for you. So I would suggest you practice a lot on the purchase and sale agreement until you feel really comfortable with it, because it does take a lot of practice. And the more you practice and the more you just kind of like memorize it, know it, the easier it's going to be for you when you get in front of someone and you're really nervous. Okay, so let's talk about the house that we were at last week. So I don't know, did everyone notice that they dropped the price on it? Did anyone disagree that it should have been dropped? Nope. Okay, so I think that that was also the case. So what are your, tell me kind of the process. So I want to take a little survey. I don't have a little thing here. I want to kind of write down each person what you would suggest to a buyer you feel like it should sell for. So did you do it, Edward? No?
No.
Okay. So Gabby, did you get what price?
I did a rough one on my computer yesterday, but mine came in a lot lower than it was listed for.
Yeah.
Like 664.
664. Okay.
Because there was I was having a hard time finding comps. Like when I did the legal description, there was only 2 that's closed in the past year.
Yeah. And we're going to kind of talk about that. I just want to kind of see where your numbers came in. And then we're going to talk about what comps I used, what my thought process was in choosing those comps, and the things that I feel that are pluses with the property and maybe negatives with the property just from 25 years of showing property and that type of thing. Yes.
Did you guys, I know you did the property tour last week. I missed that one. Did you guys do the process of like how you do your CMAs or?
Nope, we did not. It was just essentially if I were to show the property to a buyer, we looked at that. We did kind of point out a few things, like the one thing that I would consider with this property is 3 acres, which that's a lot of value. It's hard to find comps for 3 acres. Also, it wasn't 3 acres of usable space. It was probably, an acre and a half or so like trees, which provided privacy. So for some people, they may say, I don't care if it's 3 acres per se, but I want the privacy. So even if it's an acre and a half, but it has the same privacy, it might be just as valuable to someone, or as 3 acres, or they'd rather pay less for a house and still have that same privacy factor, but not pay more just because of per se acreage.
Is that, once we get through this, is that something in one of the future boot camps? Because I've noticed that everybody does their CMAs differently,
Yes.
and so that's something I definitely feel like.
Yes,
we need.
we're gonna touch on it today, like the little thought process if you were working with a buyer, how you'd want to go through it. But then we're also, July is going to be about sellers, so we're going to go through an intense CMA, because you're absolutely right. Everyone does it differently, and I probably do it more different than most. And not that the way I do it is correct. Everyone kind of like, but I do it more feel, years of experience, which is hard for you to do right now. And then also, but the more you look at property, the more easier it'll be for you. But I'm still going to go through my process. A lot of people do a percentage. They do a lot of adjustments. I don't do adjustments. I look at the picture of when a buyer's buying in this process, because we're not looking at sellers right now. We're looking at a buyer. But the process of what's available right now for this buyer. If they're needing to buy now or sometime in the near future, they've got a snapshot of what's available in the time frame they're looking. I mean, it's the same things. You're not going to tell a buyer, well, of course you could wait 6 months and then, another house you like better could come up, but you can't be looking in the rearview mirror all the time. You have to make the decision that's best for you at the time, and then you live with that. Because otherwise you could always say, oh, well, that one would have been better, but it wasn't available. So it's just like that in life. You may be married to someone right now and you go, damn, he would have been better, but but you didn't choose right at the time. So it doesn't mean you're going to get a divorce. Maybe, that's the way it goes. So you kind of think about that analogy with a home too.
And that means, once you do get your buyer in contract, first thing you do, don't forget to turn off their MLS subscription. Forgot that's my, he a couple weeks later, he's like, I'm like, I meant to not forget that, because then they start getting FOMO.
Yes.
They're already in contact, and then they see everything that came on the market after.
Yeah.
So
I
that
try
was
to-
a rookie mistake on my end.
Well, I try to encourage people to, once they make the decision and they commit to something, commit to it. Don't, let's make this process go all the way through. You committed for a reason. Let's continue that commitment as long as all the rest of the stars align. So anyway, we go through that. Okay, Gabby, we got your number. Did you do a CMA?
It's on my laptop. I don't know.
No? Okay. Lanny, what number?
So, you said people do it different ways. This little property I'm dealing with right now, I kind of went just with the tax assessment on it, value,
Mhm.
and I went from there. Is that probably a good way to do it too? Start from there? And-
You can definitely consider that, but that's not market value.
Yeah,
And you're
yeah.
trying to get to market value.
So, but market value would be more usually. Everything I've seen,
Typically, yeah.
it's more.
Yep.
So.
Yep, usually the
But,
tax.
so that's what I
record-
was saying. Start from there, be a good start maybe, and then
That'd
start.
probably be the lowest number you'd end
Yeah,
up with,
yep,
if you want to
exactly.
look at it that way. Because most things aren't overvalued in the tax records, but some are. I mean, there are
I
some
haven't
that
seen
are.
any.
But it just depends on the property.
Yeah.
I think, when you're looking at more of a land property, yours is kind of a little bit unique.
Yeah.
But if you're looking at land, that's definitely probably going to be the lower end. Because remember, the tax assessor, they get their values based on people turning in their little green cards when they sell their home. And they send it to the buyer and they send it to the seller, and they ask them what they sold their house or what they bought their house for. And if that is filled out and sent back to the municipality, guess what? They now have documentation of what the market value should be. And if your value was lower, guess what? Your taxes are about to go
Are
up.
they required to send that in?
No,
Okay.
not required.
So a good thing is not to send it
Do
You don't want
realtors
your taxes to go up.
coach them on buyers and sellers on not sending it in?
Because what they typically do is they send that information along with your exemption form. They send them together. Well, of course, you want the exemption, so you fill the exemption out, and people have to just think that they have to fill both of them out, but it's not required. So send one in, maybe not the other.
Okay.
So Laney, what'd you come up? come up with?
So I looked at it two different ways. I looked at it, I ran one on Solds.
Okay.
And on Solds, it is way overpriced. I went the last 6 months and it should be down well under 600, around the 650 mark.
Okay.
Going off, or 550 mark. 550 mark going off Solds. Now, if you go off what's available, 625 to 650 is not a bad price looking at what's available out there right now. So,
Okay.
like you said, do they have to buy now?
Yep.
Or are they willing to wait 6 months and see what else comes about, what the market does?
That could come with.
I came up with around 650 as well. It was really hard to find houses that were that same exact style. That
Yeah, there
lasted
aren't any.
log cabin, but yeah, just based off of what has been sold, I should have done maybe 6 months versus a year, just to kind of make it more accurate. But 650 is kind of right.
Okay. And yeah, appraisers typically look at no more than 6 months. So just so you guys know that too. That's what they're gonna look at when they do the appraisal. George, what'd you come up with?
Okay, so I had found 12 comps, but it was tough because I like limited it with the circle, to the area, and I did it, and there was only like 2 log cabins that have sold in the last year, so or log built houses. So I did it a little bit different. I kind of went in, and I went from 1 to 3 acres, just because there's only like what seemed to be like 1 usable acre there, and then I matched bedrooms, bathrooms, all that. And went and I found 12 comps total, ranging, the low was 569, the high was 882. And once all the comps and adjustments were finished, the price that I would suggest, said 695, but I'd probably go like 685-ish.
Okay.
And that's where I ended
All
up
right.
at.
So one thing that you did that I would maybe change next time is I would not go up higher than what it's already listed. So
Okay.
I would eliminate, because especially if you're using the one in Flex, because what Flex does is it takes the lowest and the highest and gives you in the middle. So if your highest is 850, which is 100,000 over what it was listed, then you're gonna end up way higher on your mid-range
Mhm.
and your high range. So, but if you end up adjusting it way down, but if it's that far up, I probably would just eliminate it as a comp.
Okay,
So-
so anything like,
Anything higher than a list price,
okay,
you would eliminate as a comp.
Okay.
And
Yep.
how do you go, Tony?
So I had the same mentality. I kind of went back a little bit further, but my number was what, 666, I think. I didn't.
You little
Don't
guy.
make it weird. You guys always have to make it weird. Yeah, it was 666, and I put in all the same, like the amenities of the property, and it really came down to basically acres for me, because I saw one that sold for 600, and it was completely updated. It was lacked maybe 1 acre, so I think it was like 1.5 or 1.85, but it was completely updated, and it was private and all those things. So I mean, for this property, the one that we're looking at, I mean, you have a lot of updates. The roof needs to be fixed, the floors need to be fixed. I mean, it's a tiny little, there's a lot of things that I see needing to be adjusted for. So yeah, 666.
You guys can come up here if you want.
So it's okay.
I won't break on you if you're up at the front. Let me get
You
you
don't
one.
bite too hard anyway.
Not too bad. Okay. So I think that totally makes sense, Tony, the way that you did that. And you're right, there are those things, and so when you're talking to a buyer, they want to take that into consideration with the price.
And I kept it, instead of keeping it low, like at 600 or 650, you're right, like if there's people that just want to be complete sourdoughs and just live out there with the privacy, and so I took into account that thought process of, yeah, one of those acres you can't really use, there's an easement on it, but it's covered with trees, you're completely blocked by everything, so I feel like 666, even though it's not bad, it is a good price.
I would at least change the last one to a 3 or 4.
Yeah, we would get to like 665.
Oh, there we go. Okay, Carmen, what did you think?
It's not necessarily what I thought, it's just what I got.
Okay.
So yesterday, when I spoke with you, I had found very different comps than what I found this morning when I actually went through and finalized my CMA. So yesterday I was sitting at about 675. Today I came up with 605. I was kind of blowing through it, and something that I realized I didn't do was set it for the last 6 months, and I think that's why I got so many more comps this morning.
Yeah.
So I went back the last year. I was like, wow, why didn't I find any of these yesterday? And it just kind of like dawned on me when we were talking about it. But yeah, so today I came up with about 605. I mostly just took into account the size of the home, and they all kind of happen to be, I mean, aside from that one being log and not actually being able to find anything else that was log, they were all about the same age with kind of the same finishes. So they were kind of comparable in style in that aspect. One of the places even had the same carpet, which was weird. But in my mind, I kind of still felt like 605 was a little bit low, possibly for the size of the land and the privacy that you're getting. But I feel like it really does depend on the individual, because some people, because you can get a really nice home in Anchorage for 605. But if you're looking at like kind of being more rustic and have that privacy and that like Alaskan kind of feel, then somebody, you know, might actually pay that for that home or pay more for that home, just kind of depending on the person and what they want.
So kind of
Those
taking
unique homes.
Yeah, so taking that in consideration of like what your first one came in at and what
Yeah.
your other one came in at, and you're kind of thinking, you know, comparing it, and you do have to give value for that land because land is valuable. So where do you feel it should be?
Probably somewhere in the middle, I would
Give me
say.
a number.
Like six, we'll be in the middle, like 635, 640.
Okay. 640. All right, perfect. Scott, what'd you come up with?
I ran twice as well. I think one of the things that I looked at for the parameters was age of the property. I put in, I think, 1975 to 1995, something like that. And that eliminated a bunch of properties, probably also parameters of 2 to 4 acres is what I put in there. You put in 1, you get a lot more. So I bumped it to 2 to 4 acres. I put, I think, 2 to 4 bathrooms, which I think also gave you more. And, it had 2.5 baths, but I got a number that had 4 baths in there. But anyway, I got 9 total. And I looked at them individually, and there are some older ones that are in the 500s. And I didn't eliminate the nice one, which was 775. I did not eliminate that. So my number came at 621 on the second round. I think on the first round, I changed the parameters just a little bit, changed the bathrooms, and I got it about 670. So I also agree it's probably somewhere in the middle. I would say 640, 650. What I put it at, but I mean, when you're talking about the acres, it's so subjective on what people want.
Yep.
And so it's hard to put a value on that. Privacy as well. So as far as the numbers go, that's what we got.
Okay. Yes,
So I didn't do this exercise,
right?
but would you even take in consideration the location?
Of course, always.
Because I noticed, looking at different things, Chugiak, say to Eagle River, it'd be almost the same house, but $100,000 or more difference.
Yeah, no, you always want to narrow it down to the area. So if we're doing this property, you definitely want to stay more hillside. Now, I would say another place you could consider would be up in Stuckagon Heights, because a lot of people kind of value those the same. You get the same type of privacy, you get kind of away from things, you get larger lots. So that is a possibility that you could maybe add in. But other than that, you would definitely stay more on the hillside. You would not compare South Anchorage to Eagle River or Chugiak. So that's not typically what you would do. So, well, I think, you know, this is really interesting because you guys all came in, you know, somewhere in between. I think the lowest was 640 to 685. So 640 to 685, if you kind of like look at everything. And I'm not gonna ask you guys as much because you're partially listing it, so I don't wanna have that on tape. So we'll keep that one quiet. So I saw that, it was obviously brought down to 729. Do you know if there's been an increase in showings or activity or any interest since it's been dropped to 729?
Yes, it's been kind of like steady,
Very slow, but steady.
slow but steady.
And what are the comments that you're getting back on the property?
It's a little bit overpriced.
Okay.
And that it's pretty unique.
Yeah.
Needs the right buyer.
And I would agree with
And the floors.
the
Did
floors.
you guys go there yet?
Oh yeah, we were there last
Okay.
weekend. We did the whole
Okay, yeah,
tour.
the floors.
Yeah.
We did the chapstick move and yeah, it, like rolled down.
Yeah, they believe that the foundation around the outside, the perimeter of the structure's totally fine, but that they think there's wooden posts underneath the floor, and those have pressed into the ground, is what I've been told.
So they think, is it on pilings or is it on a concrete? Not sure.
I think it's in concrete and the
Block.
Well, yeah, around the outside, underneath the concrete blocks, yeah, that is like in the middle of the.
The floor style says log. I don't know if that's what you mean by the log.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
No,
no
floor
one really
style,
knows.
floor style was like the
Got a basement in there?
Sort of,
we were
Crawl
there.
space?
it's not, on one side, it's kind of like a daylight basement. On the other side, you can just open the door and look out.
But is there a crawl space underneath? Is there a hatch for a crawl space?
I'm just wondering like where the floor is.
The
I
other
see that.
contractors say in order to look at it, they'd have to pull up the floor.
So then it's gotta be a slab then.
Could that slant in the floor be just because it's a log home? So don't they have to do the adjustments annually where they go out and twist the corners or whatever?
I don't know.
So that'd be
Does
a
it
But
relief
yeah,
on
with log
everybody.
homes, because they,
Not necessarily log homes,
No, I think that would be a piling, more of a piling type of a thing.
yeah.
But, I mean, it should have been structured for the weight of the logs. I mean, logs obviously weigh a lot more than 2x4s and things like that, but that should have been all factored in structurally when it was built. But, things move over time. I mean, not just log homes, other homes, you're gonna have some shifting, some changing soils, that happens. It's not super unusual. So I want to kind of go through and show you, I want you to look at my CMA. And if we looked, what my recommendations came in, somewhere between 645 and 679. So you guys did very good. I'm very proud of you. Because I really think that's probably where it's gonna end up selling. That's my opinion. And for several reasons. So if you look at like the one that's 750, that's Northfield, and I always include the ones that have the photos in the CMA. The reason why I do that, it's a lot easier for a buyer to see how it compares when they can see the photos. Because it's not just about the numbers ever. It's about the finishes, all kinds of different things like updated finishes, larger kitchen space. And I think we all agree, some of the things, and I'm sure Chris and Carla and Janet have all heard this about, this particular home is the master bathroom issue, with the shower head being so low. It doesn't really have a lot of updates. The carpeting needs to be replaced. The flooring, needs to be dealt with. The kitchen's not real big. Some people don't care, but a lot of people do in this price point. So the privacy is great. It's not a steep driveway, which was also a plus. And so it definitely does need the right buyer for sure. But the decks are great. I mean, that big flat deck, I would add, mother-in-law to that or something. I mean, it just seems like that would be a great, because it's just not that usable. And you could do something else with it to get like a larger, like a either mother-in-law or a bigger master, something like that, but that has to be adjusted in price, right? People aren't gonna pay over 700,000 typically for a house that needs, that has all those different idiosyncrasies. So you have to kind of think about those items. So when you look at the one on Northville, you're like, I think this one's probably not quite as nice as that one. You look at the one on Elizabeth, and that one looks like it's a lot more comparable, I think, and it's at 693, but it's active. And it has, 2-car garage built in the 1980. It's only an acre, but it's very private. So then you look at the other one that's 655 on Elmore. And that one has a lot of the same kind of features as well, the big windows, and it has some view, but it's also not like a real big house. It's 2,258 square feet. And then you go to the next one, that's 639 on Black Bear. And that was just a totally different feel for that house. And that one's, I would say that was probably priced pretty good. I would think. It probably won't be on the market a long time. I think it's newer on the market.
We looked at it. The kitchen is very small
A little small.
and the layout is a little weird too, just like downstairs, you remember? And it has like the beautiful views of everything, but then it's like a drop down. you
So it
can
doesn't have
really-
that usable yard.
Yeah.
Got
You
it.
can really use.
Yeah.
If it's the one to get around.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the garage, it's pretty much just one garage because they converted the inside of the other side to like a shop, but I
Mhm.
think it can be converted back.
Yeah. But that costs money, right? And it's not like ready for someone just to go in and do that. So that will make a difference. The one on Sandpiper, I just think that's a totally different house. So I don't know that I would worry about that one. But I want you to look at this here, the next sheets here. So what I put a lot of weight into when I'm looking at this, that a lot of people, that I didn't hear anyone in here talk about, is,
Price per square foot.
Nope. I am not a fan of price per square foot. And I'll tell you why. The reason why is price per square foot only takes in consideration the size of the living space of the house. Takes no consideration for the lot size, the garage space, whether it has a view, whether it has been updated, none of that. If you're in a subdivision, you have cookie cutter houses and every one is exactly essentially the same, price per square foot works. But if you think about it, if you have a 2,000 square foot house with a 4-car garage on 6 acres, and you have another 1,200 square foot on a 6,000 square foot lot with no garage, the dollar per square foot is going to be exactly the same. But that's definitely not the same value. So that's why I don't use it unless you got apples to apples. If you have apples to apples, absolutely you can use it. Just always remember that and be careful of that. But what I like to look at is pendings. What are the buyers out there buying right now? What are they buying? What price point are they buying in consideration to this property? So if you look at this, you have the Snow Bear one, which is 2,300 square feet. It was on the market one day, pended 685. You have another one that's on East 162nd, also a little over an acre, 3 bedrooms, 2 3/4 baths, 2,600 square feet, 640 pended. It was on the market a little bit longer. I think that one might have had a price reduction as well. The one on Shandy is pending. It was 689. That's a couple acres there. Larger home. Timberluxe also pending 689. Another one 650. I went all the way up to 730. Do we see any pendings at 700 or higher?
No.
The highest is 685. So why do you think that might be? you think that interest rates have anything to do with that?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So we talked about this yesterday in the sales meeting, that people's purchasing power has dropped. So every time that we get a 1% difference in the interest rate, we get a 10% purchasing power drop in what someone can purchase. So I think that you have to kind of think about that as well. So if they were at 700,000, now their purchasing price just dropped by 70 grand. So that makes a big difference. So anyway, something to think about, and that's not every person, but that's just a rule of thumb to think about. If they were at the top of that level. Some people aren't at the top of that level, that's just the price they want to be. But something to think about, but I always look at what people are buying today, and I think that's important.
So on the pendings in the MLS, do they change the price to what the offer is?
No,
So it just stays the asking price until it's closed and then they put that in, okay.
correct. And like if I'm doing a CMA for a seller, I will call the licensees and I'll ask them, hey, can you tell me what you pinned it at? Most of the time they'll go no. But you can say, well, can you tell me if it's higher or lower or at the price? And usually they'll tell you that. So you'll have some idea of what it pinned it at, which is helpful for your seller. Because if they're all a lot lower, then you don't want to price yours quite at that number. You want to maybe go in a little lower. Or if they're all overpriced, then maybe that means that's an indication that the prices are kind of going up, and you want to go ahead and price it just maybe a little bit higher or right on that number, so you can elicit multiple offers if that's what your seller wants to do. But that information is very helpful to your seller when you're going over that information with them. So I wanted to congratulate you guys. You did a really good job on this. I'm proud of you. I know you really looked at it and you thought about it, but you take in consideration what your buyer wants, what your buyer's looking for. You take in consideration what you think an appraisal will come in at based on sold pendings and what's actively on the market right now. You want to see how quickly some of them sold, because the quicker they sold, they're more priced more correctly, right? And you take in consideration, the area and all that, and all of you guys did all that. You all did a really good job of that. So, and like I said, we're going to go deeper in when we do a CMA for a seller, but trying to figure out what your buyer should offer, you guys did a fantastic job. So, good job. So next, we're going to do the purchase and sell agreement. So I'm gonna explain the purchase and sell agreement, and we ended up writing this purchase and sell agreement for $665. So like, let's throw out $665 and see what we get, and maybe we'll get a counter, maybe we won't, maybe they'll accept it. But I think that would have been a good starting point, and based on all of you guys' numbers that you gave, I think that we'd probably all be in pretty close agreement on where this purchase and sell would be. So who wants to be my guinea pig today? Somebody who hasn't before. Anybody? Huh?
I'll go.
You want to? Okay. So come have a seat, Edward. It's okay. It'll be a good experience for you. All right. So you can take out your purchase and sell agreement that you have now. Did everyone get a copy of it? That's the one I have right here.
No.
Okay. I have some extras here.
Should be filled up.
Anybody else need it? Okay.
I'll take that extra.
All right. Is everybody ready? Okay, Edward. So we have, so I have your purchase and sale agreement here. We're gonna go ahead and go over that. Thank you for going to get pre-qualified. We have your 9% letter from your lender showing you don't have to sell a property or rent a property to qualify. And you've seen the net sheet, so you know exactly, kind of what your payment would be based on this amount. And you also know what your cash to close would be based on this amount, correct?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So, here we have the listing licensees, and then I'm gonna be the selling licensee. The listing licensees, they represent the seller, I represent you. And that's exactly, the same as what we had on our ARAC when we first, went to look at the home. It shows that I represent you and they assist, or I represent you solely. So here you are as the buyer, and you're gonna, you have $7,500.
I'm John, I'm not Jane.
Huh?
I'm John, I'm not Jane.
Well, Jane's not here. We're gonna, did you sign it out to Jane? Because she's out of town on vacation, remember?
Yeah, that's
Okay,
right.
all right. So we have earnest money. So you've brought me a personal check already for $7,500. We're gonna put that into our trust account here at Jack White. It stays in the trust account until we close, or if in the event the property is terminated, then we would either give you a choice of getting the check back, which it takes 14 days to do that because we have to make sure that it clears the bank before we would issue that back. So in the event it happens prior to 14 days, we have to wait the full 14 days. Or it can also be just kept in the trust account, and that way it can be applied to the next purchase in the event this one doesn't go through. But we're optimistic that we're gonna get this one accepted. So next we have it's in the Anchorage, city of Anchorage, and this is the zip code. The property address is 17260 Ashland Drive, and it's in Keno Hills. This is the legal description. And you want to offer a purchase price of $665,000. And for your down payment, we're just gonna put minimum here, because if you end up changing the amount you want down on the property, so right now your 9% letter says you're putting 10% down, but if you decide to change it to 20 or 5%, then we don't need to change the contract to do that. You just work with your lender on what you'd like to do there. You do intend to occupy the property as your primary residence, which also stated that on the 90% letter. It is a single family home, and you're gonna be doing new financing and you're getting a conventional loan. Does all that look great?
Yep.
Do you have any questions so far?
Nope, nope.
Okay, so go to the next page. And this shows that you've already gone in to speak with Home State Mortgage, and you've already, they've already checked to make sure that you had satisfactory credit report, acceptable income, your source of down payment, ability of funds to close, and it's not contingent on the lease or sale of any other property. So since you're renting now, then you don't have to worry about, selling other property or renting it to qualify for this property. You've already gone in and done an application with the lender as well. And this is all reflected on the 9% letter. So this way the seller knows that all of those things have already been done. That's why we ask for that ahead of time and we send it over with the offer. So if you do not reveal a contingency or a fact to the lender, and this purchase agreement does not record because of that non-disclosure, after the initial application's been done, then you're in default. And kind of what that means is, say, if you don't list every debt that you have on your application, like you bought a cabin with a friend and it's owner finance, you pay them $100 a month, all of those things, regardless whether it was through a bank, it doesn't matter. If you have a debt, it needs to make sure you have it on the application, because that all has to be figured in your qualification for a loan. So in the event that you, your document, all the documents that are required, which we've already done all this, so this doesn't apply. You've already done the application, you've given your documents, so you're actually in very good shape here. But one thing that is important is you have to get approval from the seller in writing if you're going to change the lender or the type of financing. So if you decide to change from conventional to FHA or something like that, we have to get the seller's approval. If you decide to go to a different lender, we have to get the seller's approval. So Are you pretty confident that you feel good about this lender and this loan program? Okay, perfect.
Good to go.
So you agree to pay all fees to satisfy the condition in a timely manner required by the lender in obtaining the loan. So down here below, it shows all the different items that are typically what is charged for a buyer. So on your net sheet that we have, we've matched that with this. So it says on your net sheet that you're responsible for the lender, the origination fee, the commitment fee, the discount points, mortgage insurance premium. So I want to go over those real quick. So the lender origination fee is a fee that you pay to the lender for originating your loan. We're not going to have a commitment fee here unless you decide to add Alaska Housing to your loan program or something like that. But just with a flat conventional, there's no commitment fee, as you saw on the net sheet. There's nothing there. Discount points, if you decided to pay down your loan to get a lower interest rate, then you would pay that discount point. If that is something that you're thinking about doing, I would make sure that the lender or comes to me and I'll do the math for you, because sometimes paying down a points is very expensive. It can be like $8,000 or $9,000. And so what you really want to do is you want to look at what is your payment today at 6%, and then what would your payment be if you dropped it, you paid it down 1%, it cost $8,000. So say for easy math, it changes your payment $100 a month, and you spend $8,000 to do that. So that would be 80 months that it would take you to pay the difference. So are you going to be in this house for 80 months, that many years? If you think probably not, I mean, you would need to be in there more than 80 months because you're just going to break even at 80 months, right?
Yeah.
So is it really worth putting that $8,000 up front to do that or not? So maybe just make sure you do that math before you consider doing that if that's brought up to you. Because I know it's kind of scary with the interest rates being higher right now, but you want to make sure that it makes sense if you're going to buy it down. So mortgage insurance premium insurance. So mortgage insurance, this sounds like, oh, this is something kind of cool, but it actually, if you're paying anything less than 20% down, so right now you're looking at doing 10% down.
Okay.
So you would have to pay mortgage insurance. And what mortgage insurance does is it protects the bank for you defaulting. It doesn't help you at all. It's zero benefit to you. It just helps them.
One benefit would be not having to pay the 20% if you don't have it.
Correct. If you don't have the 20%, you don't have a choice. But it's not an insurance that insures you or helps you with anything. It insures the banks, but if you put 20% down, then there's no mortgage insurance required. So just want to let you know that as well. And then lender doc prep fee, that is the fee that the lender charges to prepare the documents, and that's split between you, the buyer, and the seller. Lender processing fee, typically there's either a processing fee or origination fee, but it's going to be listed there on your net sheet which one they're charging. So sometimes they have a process fee and no origination fee, and vice versa. So just look at that on your net sheet to know. So flood certificate, that's to make sure the house is in a flood zone. The tax registration, which is on the seller side, that's just to register it so the municipality knows who owns the home and who is responsible for paying taxes. Your credit report reserves and prepaid interest is all lender fees. So the lender, of course, pulls a credit report for you. They've already done that. The reserves, this is the reserve account that's established for you to pay your taxes and insurance after closing. And so on your net sheet, it also shows like, usually they do like 15 days of interest, maybe 10 months of insurance, and that's all factored in. And so that establishes your reserve account. So when your taxes are due, this half is due in June, the second half is due in August. So when those taxes are due, the money's already in that escrow account for the mortgage company to be able to pay the municipality and get your taxes paid. So you don't have to come out of pocket with your taxes when they're due in June and August. It's already being taken care of as part of your mortgage payment. And then the same with your homeowner's insurance. So your homeowner's insurance is also a portion of your payment is going toward that payment. So when it's due, then the mortgage company will pay that for you. So it's all already taken care of. Prepaid interest, a lot of loans you have to do prepaid interest, so it'll show 15 days of interest. So depending on when we close on a property, if we close at the end of the month, your prepaid interest is going to be like 1 or 2 days. If you close beginning of the month, it's going to be more like 30 days because it depends on when you close. So typically, the lender's going to just factor 15 days just because it's right in the middle. But that number may change a little bit, and your closing costs may change a little bit depending on when we close in the month. There's no HOA, homeowners association for this property, so none of this applies. We are asking the seller to provide an appraisal. There's title insurance. So the owner pays the owner's policy, which covers the property, and you pay the Alta policy that covers the bank, insures the bank. There's no liens or encumbrances on the property. We will get a preliminary title report, and then we'll be reviewing that together and make sure there's no liens or encumbrances, no judgments or anything like that that'll affect the home. Recording fee, this is to record the deed of trust. That's going to be split between you, the buyer, and the seller. Escrow closing fee, this is something that title company uses, or title company charges to for your closing to do your documents for that. Any assessments levied or pending, which typically if there's going to be assessments, the seller's going to know about that ahead of time. So that's, if those apply, then we're putting that on the seller's side. Attorney doc prep fee, that's for the attorney to prepare the deed of trust for closing. And then of course the brokerage fee is to pay the realtors and their brokers. So the brokerage fee is split 4 ways between the listing licensee of their broker, the selling licensee of their broker. So smoke detectors and CO detectors need to be in the home. If they're not, the seller is going to need to provide those. And then this home is on well and septic. So we're asking them to provide a well flow test and a basic water test, also septic inspection. And because we're here in the municipality, you have to do a, call it COSA, certification of the septic system. And that's done through the muni. And that's all done. The sellers do that. They'll provide a report. You'll get to review the report. And we have the well and septic addendum. That's part of this contract. And that is going to allow you to be able to talk to the engineer. And if you have any questions about the septic test, if for some reason the septic comes in and it's like 85% capacity, then it gives you the ability to renegotiate if you choose to with the seller. Without that, it's just simply a pass or fail, which we don't want. That's how we add that to our contract. So funds for recording, the next page. So funds for recording, this is just saying the buyer and the seller cannot record until all funds have been collected. So you'll need to bring in a check or a wire for the amount, the cash to close that we have there. Should be close to that number. It may vary a little, but you're going to get what's called a CD or closing disclosure. And you'll get that 3 days before we can schedule your closing. And that's going to tell you how much your cash to close is going to be that you need to bring in. It's going to show you all your closing costs, all that comes from the lender. So when you get that document, you'll have to approve that. And when you do, that 3-day time frame starts. So let me know when you get the CD and you accept it, because then I'll know to schedule our closing, because I like to be there at closing with you as well. And for your funds for closing, you can bring in a cashier's check, as long as it's from in-state cashier's check. It can't be from out of state. You can also wire the funds, but you cannot bring in a suitcase of cash. They will not accept that.
Oh, shucks.
So the wire transfer warning, there has been a lot of fraud with wires, so you want to make sure that the title company is going to put the instructions in the preliminary title report. They're never going to email you and tell you that the wiring instructions have changed. So if you ever get such an email, then just notify me immediately. Do not respond to it, and we'll verify that if there's been any changes. But typically, that's people, scammers trying to steal your money. So don't reply to anything like that. It will not be emailed to you, and they won't call you and tell you we're changing the instructions either. Proration, so the taxes, interest on the loan, being assumed, which you're not. There's no prepaid rents, there's no HOA, so the only thing that applies here are your taxes. And so the taxes are gonna be prorated from the time of recording. So the seller's gonna pay for the property from January 1st, the taxes from January 1st to the date of recording, and you're responsible from recording till the end of the year. And that's where your reserves are gonna pay for that. Service agreements, this is just saying if there are any service agreements that the seller is going to be responsible for that, you're not responsible for taking that on. I did not see anything that applies to that. Typically it's security systems, security monitoring systems. That house did not have it, so this isn't going to apply. Title insurance, the seller has to convey statutory warranty deed for the property. It is subject to restrictions contained in the plat and the deed, covenants, and conditions. That's why when we get the preliminary report, you and I will go over it together, and we'll make sure that you understand it. We'll look at the plat and make sure that nothing is affecting the property, or if it is affecting the property, you're aware of it. If there's any liens on the property, the seller has to be able to remove those liens prior to us recording. After recording, you will receive a owner's title policy that gives you free and clear title on the property. Neither the seller nor the seller's licensee make any representation to the lot corners. So we are asking for them to do a new as-built because we didn't get an as-built on the property. It wasn't in the documents. So we want to make sure that nothing's over the line, that we don't have any, if we have easements, about it, all of those different things. But what it doesn't do is they don't go and they check the rebar in each corner. They don't mark the corners of the lot. That's something different. And as-built is as the house sits on the lot. So some people get those confused, so I just wanted to make sure you understood what that was. The next section, yes.
This title policy has a date on it, or in here it has a date 6 days after you.
Yes,
And in the next few pages, there's gonna be all these dates.
yes.
Are these dates spacing standard dates?
In
How
the-
do you select which dates you want for what?
So in the last class we had, I believe, I gave you the purchase and sale agreement. I wrote in there 7 to 10 days,
Okay,
this many days after this. So yes, they all are in sequence. And so with the title, there's no reason why you shouldn't just have that order within a week of writing the offer. Get it done, make sure there's no issues. It's not gonna cost the seller anything if the deal falls through. So just go ahead and get that done.
yeah, I think I have those dates last time we
Yep.
did this, but within those dates, you can just pick any date you want.
Yeah, it's
7,
not
10 days, 7 days, or 8 days, or whatever. And
exactly,
a lot of times there's by 4 p.m. or something like that. As the buyer's representation, you pick those dates and times out as you put it together.
yes, typically. Some of them we're gonna talk about, and you'll see as we go through this, that we'll talk about to make sure that the buyer is available for specific dates. But the prelim, we're gonna order that ourselves. And so, or the selling or the listing licensee typically orders the preliminary title report. And so we just wanna get that done soon.
And the buyer, in this case, the buyer has the right to select title company.
Correct, absolutely. And we usually ask them if they have anyone, particular prior to writing up the purchase and sale agreement. Anyone particular they want to use, most of the time they go, I don't care. And so we usually just pick someone on those. Good questions. Okay, so number 9, documentation disclosure required by law. Lead-based paint. This house was built in 1980, so it was, after 1978, so we shouldn't need to have to worry about lead-based paint. You've already received the property disclosure and read through it. We'll initial through that today. You've already filled out the AREC, so that's the Alaska Real Estate Consumer Commission Consumer Disclosure that we call the AREC. That was signed, when we first started looking at properties. Sex offender, the state of Alaska requires registration of all sex offenders residing within the state of Alaska. So you have the right to check the website. The website is listed right here. and you can check to make sure there's no sex offenders too close for your comfort. Along with, they also keep a list of drug manufacturing sites. So you can also, same website, check and make sure the home is not, a drug manufacturing site. And the only caveat to that is you need to do it within this time frame of your due diligence. So just don't wait till 2 days before closing and then decide you're going to check for sex offenders. You need to do that within our time frame of due diligence. There is no public offering statement here because there's no HOA, so that only applies to that. Physical inspection of the property. Until the date of possession or recording, whichever is earlier, the seller agrees to maintain the property in its current condition, subject to normal wear and tear. So they need to keep it in the same condition. They can't just, throw a crazy party and trash the place now. They have to keep it nice and update or maintain the systems and things like that. Buyer seller understand that the brokers and licensees were not expert in the field, so we suggest you get a home inspection done on the property. It protects you and tells you kind of like what's going on with the property. You have the right at your own expense to hire a licensed contractor or qualified professional to further inspect and investigate the subject property on or before. It usually takes a couple of weeks to get them scheduled. So I put this out until the 7th. But I wanted to make sure we can alter this if we need to. Are you going to be available? Can you get a day off work?
Sure.
Okay, because it's really important that you're there at the inspection. You not only see what the inspector finds, but you also learn a lot about the systems of the house, maybe where the main shutoff is, how you should maintain a home, different things like that. So it's very beneficial that you're there. So we're going to get the home inspection no later than here. So is there a specific day that works best for you?
Anytime.
Anytime? Okay. Then I'll just see what the closest, I'll just check the website, whichever inspector that you choose. And then we'll go ahead and get that scheduled. So I laid out a few inspectors here. Is there a particular inspector that you've used in the past or that you liked?
Anyone is fine.
Okay. So why don't you tell me which one do you think you'd use, or maybe you just Google.
Probably the first one.
Okay.
Discovery Home Inspections.
Have you heard of them before?
No, but it looked good.
Okay. Well, why don't you Google it? So we don't have to decide that right now. So when you get home, read the reviews, check these out, maybe ask a few people, and then decide if one, ends up better than the other. And if you still want to use this same inspector, that's totally fine. And I'll go ahead and schedule that so it fits both of our schedules because I like to be there with you as well. Sound good?
Sure.
All right. So seller has to make the premises available for the inspection. They have to, or you shall defend, indemnify, and hold the seller harmless for anything that may happen to the inspector or the property. So if there's any damage to the property, the inspector is going to be responsible for that, or you're going to be responsible for that. The inspection may include, but not limited to, square footage, rental agreements, essentially everything in this paragraph. So anything you want to know about the property, you need to do it within this time frame. It's your time to check all this out. Do you think you'll be able to have some time to check all this out within this time frame? Okay, great. So you understand that measurements for square footage and dimensions may vary. So if it's really important to you on the square footage of the home or certain sizes, when we do the inspection, we're going to be in the house for a couple of hours. It usually takes like 2 to 3 hours to go through the house. So it's a great time to bring a tape measure if you want to change out blinds or you want to, measure for furniture, any of that. Go ahead and bring a tape measure, and you can do that during the inspection time if you'd like. So you're responsible for researching whether or not the property is in a fire service and road service area. You're also advised to research land use permits, building regulations, all of that. The muni.org is a great resource. You can check for permits. You can check for all different things about properties there. And if you need help navigating that, just let me know. The buyers, you have to furnish a copy of all reports that you obtain in considering this property. So when you get the home inspection, you have to give them a copy of that report. If you have any other inspections
Who do I
done,
give a copy to?
in effect, you give it to me, and then I give it to the listing licensee who gives it to the seller. So it always goes in that, in that way. But they get a copy of everything. So even if you get the inspection report and you decide, I'm not going further with the property, you still have to give them the report, even though you paid for it. So it's just part of our contract. They have the right to know anything because they have to disclose from this point forward any material defects that they know of the property. So this tells them what those material defects are. So buyer's request for repairs, remedies, or termination shall be in writing and supported with written documents if applicable, and delivered to the listing seller or listing licensee no later than the 11th. This is a very, very important date. So we want to make sure that you're going to be.
That's a good day.
It
It's
is.
my birthday.
Oh, that's great. Perfect date. So are you going to be in town? It's your birthday.
Sure.
Okay. So if you decide that you're going to terminate this agreement, you check out everything on the property. If for some reason you're like, I don't want to go forward with this contract, it has to be done no later than your birthday at 5 o'clock. Okay? And you can terminate for any reason whatsoever. It doesn't have to be from the home inspection. It could be any reason whatsoever. So, but that's a drop dead date. If you go ahead and you give them a request for repairs, then your ability to terminate, if you come to agreement, goes away. So if you want to get out of it, it has to be prior to this date. Very, very important date. So we need to make sure that you're in town and available during this time frame because we're going to be negotiating.
Or at the very
repairs.
least available for a signature or something like that.
Yes, either you have Wi-Fi available, you have computer available, that type of thing. I can reach you on the phone because you don't want to miss these dates at all. It's really, really important. So what happens is we'll get the home inspection back. Say there's 4 or 5 things on there we want to ask the seller to do. I write that up on an amendment and then we present it to the sellers. So what happens next is the seller and the buyer have to reach an agreement regarding their request for repairs no later than the 15th. So we would write it up and give it to them early because we want to have a little time for negotiation in case they say they don't want to do part of them or whatever the case may be. So once we get that information, if we don't have an agreement by the 15th, then you have these 3 choices. You may terminate the purchase and sale agreement. You may accept the seller's last counter offer for repairs or remedies, or you may accept the property with any and all property conditions within, so essentially as it is. So if you don't respond within the time allotted, then the seller may terminate the contract within 3 days. So it keeps us from being in a long-term stalemate, right?
Okay, yeah.
If the seller's corrections are subject to repair or re-inspections prior to closing, then we're going to have the same inspector who did the inspection to start with go out and re-inspect. You're going to pay for that first re-inspection, which could be, it ranges from price between $75 and $150 typically. But you'll want to ask the inspector when you do the inspection what they charge, so you know ahead of time. If you fail, obviously, to get a home inspection done, then you're accepting the property in the as-is condition. So we're already getting inspections, so don't have to worry about that. And then accept otherwise specified in the purchase and sale agreement and the property disclosure, you're taking an as-is whereas condition. So in the event improvements of the property are destroyed or materially damaged prior to recording and the buyer, at your buyer's option, you may terminate. So heaven forbid, if the place burns to the ground, you don't have to continue to buy it. If it's damaged in any way, you have an option to go forward or terminate. Insurance. It is your responsibility to determine whether or not homeowner's insurance is available for the property. Not all properties can get homeowner's insurance. So you'll want to check with your insurance company early on, like soon, today, tomorrow, next week. Make sure that you can get homeowner's insurance for the property and what the cost is. And you can shop around. They all charge different amounts. Usually if you use the same company that you have your car insurance with, you might get a better rate. But you also, if you want earthquake insurance on the property, that's going to be additional. And so you'll want to talk
So
to
is
them
this
about
coordinated with the lender too?
Yes, so when you choose which company you want to use for your homeowner's insurance, you're gonna ask them to send a binder to your lender. So they'll send the information to the lender, and so the lender, because remember, the lender has to know how much your premium is, so they can figure out your reserve account and all of that all comes together. So you'll wanna do that early and make sure there's not gonna be any issues. Next, we talk about the appraisal. The seller's gonna advance the funds for the appraisal, and we're gonna order those no later than the 19th. So we come to an agreement on the repairs, and once we come to agreement on repairs, then we order the appraisal. And then the appraisal we have here, oh, I forgot a check mark. See, this is why you explain this to your clients, because when you're going through explaining it, you see if you missed something. So do you see something that I missed here?
Yeah, right here.
Yes. The completion of this purchase is or is not contingent on the appraisal of the property being equal or greater to the sales price. So we want it to be equal or greater, not correct?
Yep.
So we want the appraisal to at least come in at the sales price. So if it does not come in at the sales price, then we're gonna have the ability to renegotiate the sales price with the seller, okay? Within 3 days. So in the event there are lender required repairs that have to be negotiated between that seller and the buyer, then you have 3 days to come to an agreement. So this doesn't come up super often, but sometimes it does. So the appraiser, when the appraiser walks through the house, they don't do an inspection the same as the home inspector, but they do have certain things they have requirements for, like egress windows. They're gonna check to make sure they usually go in the attic and the crawl space, especially, most of them do. So if they find something, they have the ability to write that up too and demand that those things are taken care of prior to closing. They're gonna protect the lender and make sure the lender is not loaning on something that there's a problem that can affect their asset, essentially. And so that's kind of the job of the appraiser.
And who pays for the appraiser?
We wrote, remember on the front, we have the seller is paying for that.
Okay.
So we have right here under the appraisal.
I
Right
couldn't
here, it's
remember.
on the seller side, yep. So we have right here. So if there's any, if it's subject to reinspection, the same kind of thing happens if it were the home inspection. Remember in the home inspection, if it's subject to reinspection, the buyer pays for the first reinspection, and then if for some reason it's not done correctly or something was missed and then they have to go out a second time, then the seller's gonna be responsible for that second one. We're showing recording to be on August the 24th. Are you, is this date gonna work well for you?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so important thing about recording. So recording is the day that you get possession of the property, but you're actually gonna go in and sign the documents on the 23rd. So wanna make sure that you can get time off work to go and sign the documents. It'll take about an hour to do that, and they only do it during business hours. So that'll be a day you'll want to, plan to be off work at least for an hour or so. You can usually schedule during the lunch hour too if you can't get the day off or something. But it's not moving day because you don't get keys and you don't get possession of the property till the following day. And we don't know on that following day, on the 24th, exactly what time recording will take place. So it's really best for you to schedule your movers maybe the day after this. So maybe the 26th. And then that way, you're not up against, it's not recorded, you don't get the keys, because there's a little coordination that has to happen with that. And we don't want your mover sitting there and paying them by the hour and then you can't move yet. So plan accordingly to that. And also sometimes recording can vary a little bit. Sometimes it gets extended. So you'll want to see if you can have some flexibility in that week because it seems like everything always happens at the last minute. So any flexibility you can have is always great for that. So for closing, what happens is you're going to go to the title company and you're going, when you go into the title company, we set up a time and then you'll sign all the documents. And then you'll also give them your check, which we talked about, the cashier's check or the wire or whatever the case may be. And that's all done the day before. This property is not part of an HOA, so this isn't going to apply. We're not gonna have any additional documents here. It's not a tenant occupied property. We will check with the inspector to make sure that the carbon monoxide detectors are working. We kind of talked a little bit about a home warranty in the beginning, and you said you're gonna look it over and you'll decide if you wanna add that and pay for that. Those are about $500. It covers the house for 13 months. I think it's great to cover the important, like the big systems of the house. It is gonna be like focused on like your appliances and heating here as well. You can also add your appliances. It'll show on the little pamphlet, it'll kind of go over what additional costs are if you want to add different things to it. But it's kind of nice to keep your expenses down the first year you're there, and then if you decide you want to update it or renew it each year, you have the ability to do that. So something that we'll look over, and then you can decide if you want to go forward with that or you don't, but you can just read through it and research it first. Brokerage notice regarding earnest money. We kind of hit on this in the beginning where we take the earnest money. We have 14 days if we were to give that back for any reason. In the event the purchase and sale agreement is terminated, absent default of the buyer, you're going to get your earnest money back. Time is of the essence. So if you are in default, then you're going to lose your earnest money, but you can't sue the seller for losing the house of your dreams. If the seller is in default, then they're going to give back your earnest money, and you can sue them for specific performance. Earnest money dispute. In the event there's a dispute in the earnest money, then we try to get the two of you to come to an agreement through a form we call the termination agreement. If you can't come to an agreement on that, it's pretty cut and dried usually, but sometimes people want to dig their heels in and they don't want to agree. So if you don't agree, then the broker can decide who's at default and make a determination on the earnest money, and that is a binding decision. And your earnest money is here at our brokerage, so our broker will be the one making that determination. If you choose to mediate, you can mediate, and there is a way to do that through the Board of Realtors. If you don't come to terms in mediation, you can arbitrate or litigate, and the prevailing party could be entitled to attorney fees. Authorization, release of information to brokers. This is just, by signing this, is just kind of like a statement here so we can essentially do our job. We're able to take reports from inspectors and give them to you and then be writing your addendum and the appraisal. Appraiser can send us the appraisal, that type of thing. So we don't have to get a release for every little document we need. Foreign investment tax, as long as the seller's not from another country, this doesn't apply. And then our attachment, we have the well and septic addendum that we already talked about. That's part of this agreement. And then additional terms, we just asked them all personal property to be removed from the home and it to be left in professional and clean manner, no later than 2 days prior to closing. And we asked them to do that 2 days prior to closing because we want to go and do a walkthrough and make sure that the home is in the same condition with just the normal wear and tear prior to us taking possession. Because obviously when we looked at it, there were some furnishings in there. We couldn't see, behind the beds and couches and under the beds and all that. So we want to make sure that there's no holes in the walls or anything that we need to deal with. Always keep in mind too, everyone, that there's a little scrolly button right beside where additional terms and conditions are. It's not printed, but when you're in Flex, you'll see a little scroll. If you click on the scroll, it will put all of these different terms and agreements that we've already vetted as a company that you can add into your agreement without having to think about how to write it out correctly.
Scroll or like a drop down there?
It's a scroll. It's like a little scroll.
Okay, seen that yesterday.
Yeah. And so if you click on that little scroll, it'll give you all these different terms that you can use. There's escalation clauses. There's terms about heating systems and all kinds of things. So it keeps you from having to recreate the will, essentially. So look for that next time you're in Flex and you're in a purchase and sale agreement. Acceptance and delivery, this is just saying that we can accept the property in counterparts. It doesn't have to be a wet ink all the way across. It can be DigiSign and all kinds of things like that. And then on the next page here, the entire agreement is a legal binding contract. There could be tax reasons that you might want to talk to an attorney, you might want to talk to a tax accountant for going through with this purchase. Feel free to do that. You agree that recording of this contract will constitute acknowledgement of the premises and their said conditions and acceptable at the time of recording. So that's why we always do a walkthrough prior to closing, so you can see it right before we record. Because sometimes, you know, it's 45 days out from today when we actually record, and you want to kind of get another look at the house and make sure, because once we record, the house is yours. If the dishwasher breaks 2 days after you get in there, hopefully you bought the home warranty, it's gonna cost you $100 and you can get it fixed. But otherwise, that's your responsibility. That's when the line is drawn, is on recording. We're gonna ask them to respond to our offer no later than tomorrow at 8 p.m. So if we do not get a response to them by then this offer is automatically terminated. And then we're gonna have you sign here. And then what happens next is the seller has a choice. We hope